between 2016 and 2020 for Highland. It's over 500 gallons per capita per day. And then the breakdown is about 85% pressurized irrigation use and then 15% drinking water. Sorry, my voice is shaking. Fifth is regional conservation. So tying back to those regional goals, the Provo River region is targeting a 20% reduction in outdoor water use by the year 2030. And this goal is matched by Highland in your water conservation plan. The same goal to reduce by 2030 by 20%. And then the sixth section is looking forward, just some information about integrating water conservation, efficiency, and reuse into land use planning. There's a conclusion, and then it moves into goals and implementation strategies. So that was essentially a crash course on how the element is structured. And then this part is where we want to have a discussion with you all. So we're gonna look at what Highland is currently doing, and then recommendations to meet state requirements. So to structure our conversation, as I mentioned, we're gonna look at both current measures and then some ideas for potential measures. Things to be thinking about, which of the potential options have the most merit for Highland to pursue, and think about public interest, ease of implementation, cost of implementation, and then the impact or reach of that action. And then the third being, does it help to fulfill a state requirement? So to organize our recommendations, what we did was we took policy options from the regional M&I water conservation report and made them actionable based on information from the Department of Water Resources and then other documents such as the Utah Growing Water Smart Guidebook. And we're calling these best management practices so that they come directly from those resources. There's 7 categories, and that's how we've organized our recommendations. So hopefully that makes sense as we go through this. So the first category is ordinance. Please do.
I just want to add, it's likely that many of you in this room have already had conversations around water. So if some of this feels like a repeat and you've been here before, that's okay. But I think it's good for us to cover and get on the same playing field here. I think staff has done a good job bringing us up to speed as best we can with the list that we're putting in front of you. But there might be some things that you've discussed before. And so just let us know if that's a moot point. So in some ways, this element is like the cart moving before the horse, because you've already done the water conservation plan, the technical document. And yeah, so anyway, carry on. Sorry. Just thought that would be helpful.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so for this first category, some examples include your landscaping ordinance, time of day watering requirements, and then even things like plumbing, building code. So currently, these are the things that Highland is doing that falls within that category of ordinances, standards, and development policies. So in Highland, all new developments are required to connect to the pressurized irrigation system. Developers are required to provide water rights to the city. You have a time of day watering requirement. You also have maximum number of watering days. And then your sensitive lands ordinance protects watershed recharge zones, wetlands, streams, etc. Other efforts, so in 2020, there was an update to your development code that made it so that all park strips are required to be landscaped using xeriscape or waterwise methods. This directly meets one of the state requirements. During that time, the city's landscaping definition was also updated to include allowances for xeriscape. And then xeriscape, as this new thing, was added to the development code definitions. In 2023, the parkway detail was updated, and it now requires it to be xeriscaped. And xeriscaping is now required in new parkway detail, and the city worked with developers to provide at least partial xeriscaping between 2019 and 2023. So kudos. Other ideas and options. We thought we would lead out with our recommendation that will likely have the biggest impact and might be the most controversial, I don't know. It also directly would meet a state requirement. So the recommendation is to amend the city code to require water-efficient landscaping in new and reconstructed commercial, industrial, institutional, and multifamily housing projects. And then the second is the same, but for residential landscapes. And then I've included some examples of what we're talking about when we say low water use landscaping requirements. So I want to pause and open it up for some discussion. We want to try this on for size. Again, this would help meet one of the state requirements. And you get to decide which water-wise landscaping requirements you want to have in your standard. So it can be different than what you're seeing from the Conservancy District has some standards, but you can take your own take on what they're recommending. So
do you mind, Sarah, if I just ask Rob? So now, Rob, if a commercial project comes in now, we do require zero scope, right?
Not exactly. We kind of work with them, but we don't have a clear standard for a lot of our commercial zones about what the landscape requirement is. And in our various zones require different amounts of landscaping. So some are 35%, some are 20%. And how that gets implemented isn't always clear. So that's one of the things that we could address with this is let's standardize how much landscaping we require for new commercial or redeveloped commercial, and require some or all to be xeriscape or other, water-wise things going forward. We could kind of touch on it, but we could really formalize it as part of, going forward.
As we've looked at your code structure, a lot of the landscape requirements are kind of spread throughout the various zones. Many communities have actually implemented it.
Being like, what was it, Tree City, USA or something, right? And there's a certain standard that we have to meet as far as percentage of trees to square footage, or I can't remember exactly. But with trees and like large shrubs being so much more hardy, needing less water, because I was struggling to find areas where the water-wise was really defined. And I think we can kind of define it ourselves a little more by including and promoting the use of trees and large shrubs versus just grass, hardy and more water. So I think getting specific with a specific kind of landscaping code would be a really beneficial.
I think you.
So put it here on the
Scott,
ground.
go
just
ahead
lean
and put
forward.
that down. Yes.
Scott, you turned it off. It's
The
red.
green- it needs to be green.
Okay, green. Okay. I've never seen it.
It works.
Just now lean forward so they can hear it.
I think you can hear me, can't you?
Yeah.
Can't you hear me? I know you have to record it.
Scott, just
So-
speak really clearly and really loudly, please.
Are you kidding me?
Just go, Scott, you're good.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
You're doing
okay.
great. Keep going.
Okay, so I just want to add to that. I think what we need to do is define exactly what xeriscaping means. Because some people think it means just to rip everything out and put in gravel. And we had the Central Utah Water Project come and do a presentation, and that's not efficient xeriscaping. I mean, you really do need a fair amount of greenery. So I'll give you an example. I work at the Mary Fork Hospital. About 3 years ago, they ripped out a lot of their landscaping and put in gravel. I had to smile because they're taking the gravel out now and putting some landscaping back in. And so you have to kind of find kind of the happy medium. We need to define what it is, because what one person thinks is xeriscaping, another person doesn't. So I think we ought to have some guidelines. And I really like what the Central Utah Water Project before has shown us what is good xeriscaping, because Utah doesn't have to look like Las Vegas, because we have a lot more water resources than they do. So I think we just need a definition. I think that ties into what Wes was saying. because we need to understand what that means. The other question I had is you're on these lists of different things. The Central Utah Water Project apparently is buying the old gravel yard, and they're gonna use that as a recharging station for the aquifer. So before April 15th, when that watershed's coming out, the water will go in there and recharge the aquifer. So I think we should get credit for that since it's in Highland City. The other thing is we're putting in a new weir structure up at the mouth of the canyon that all the cities are putting in, and that's gotta be adding some more efficiency to the system, I would think. So I
For
just think
flooding.
we should get some credit for that as well.
So I have a question. I thought at one time on the council, and probably went through plan commission, I thought we did put some criteria of what if they put in, like Scott saying for zero scape, they had to put some plants. Is that not already in our plan at this time, or was it only discussed about?
Discussing that, and we went through those things.
So is that not was it a discussion or was it an implementation?
We did adopt it. It's at 25%,
Of-
but it's a little bit vague. It's like 25% shall include shrubs or trees or living material, but one of the things, I think to Scott's point is, and it's on the restriction, is we want to restrict the xeriscaping where you have no living.
Correct.
We want to say, don't do that,
You're right.
and here's how to do it. So I think it's more of, I think we did a good effort at trying to define xeriscaping, but we could do better at clarifying.
And are you saying you'd like to have pictures? Would it be better so we can have to define it through pictures?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean.
Is that what you
listing
said?
by name, because
These
there
are
are
examples.
organizations that have like native Utah plants and trees and
And they're all
shrubs.
listed.
And even putting it by name, because I think the general plan is a good place for that. Whereas code isn't necessarily the place to dump all that information. With the general plan being a little more forward, public facing, getting names and pictures and creating like a real vision, because that's
Do
part
we,
of the purpose.
do we have any data anywhere where, we've seen places, and along the corridor trail too, where everything's gone rock, right? The amount of heat that produces instead of, I mean, it actually ends up becoming an oven, and where it actually undoes our problem, and anything you try to plant in there is then cooked and
So-
killed. So I'm just curious, do we have any data so that when we are creating the xeriscaping plan, the heat factor, so we can come up with a responsible measurement?
Not now, but I'm sure there are resources from like Central Utah or other places where
Right.
they've done that.
Mhm.
But again, I think it's just, at the general plan level, the question is more, it sounds like everyone kind of likes the idea of, yeah, let's get better at defining what xeriscaping means and requiring it more. So we can put that as the policy and then work on the details later.
Yeah.
Correct.
You can throw in some pretty pictures of, when we say, we want to require xeriscaping, pretty picture of a nice xeriscaping thing.
Yeah.
And then later draft the ordinances and that actually implement that.
So where the
Precisely.
city's implemented right now is over on 4800, 4800 North, or North County, that new development, Ridgeview, has put xeriscape up around most of their, up in the front along the highway. Highland, as a city, at our new Highland Family Park, has all instituted xeriscaping there on our landscaping in the front of the park. So if you kind of can see, is that the criteria, is that what you kind of like that look? Do we need more? Do we need less? That might be
And
something
one
to
of
help
the
us.
things that we discussed in regarding to that was, and this is heavily for new development, obviously, or remodel, is that you don't do the park strip. You do the sidewalk, save the park strip. You don't have to worry about any water runoff. Do your trees on the inside, and that keeps the park strip from being ripped up from the trees that people are planting anyway.
Our
So
sidewalks.
I know they did that along the corridor in that development. And that was just practical smart, and that was one of the other things.
So we can, that's probably getting the weed, but that would be some things. What else do you need from us in this question here?
Yeah, so it sounds like there's an appetite for making some updates to your landscaping ordinance. So the distinction here is between essentially single-family residential versus other uses. And the state requirement specifically lists what you see in that box. So I'm just curious, do you also want to put some standards in place for residential landscapes? Or do you want to focus on other land use types?
I think it would need to be the new development only, so that.
Yeah, and this is new and reconstructed is the,
I wanted to comment actually about the xeriscape on some new developments, which I was very surprised when I go on my walks. I noticed when walking west to east along Canal, that's a very new area, and it's just rock, and then we've got this gray wall there, and it looks very utopian as you're coming down that area. It's a very wide expanse, and it's all gray, and it's all rocks, and I'm not sure how that got passed without having any landscaping there at all. And then as well, on 6,000, there's that new development there with the big pine trees that went in, the full-grown pine trees they put in there. There's on that strip there, it's just rock as well. I'm just wondering how they were able to do that without any landscaping at all, because I know we have requirements. So I thought that was interesting. We need to be more specific, I agree. And
We don't
also,
necessarily have the details on why that was
yeah, how
approved or
that,
whatever,
how
but
that got passed. And then also,
yeah.
if we could require that they actually have drip lines on all the plants, because a lot of developers, they'll put in the landscaping, but they won't put that money into actually keeping them alive for very long. So that needs to be really specific in there.
yeah, those are definitely things that the ordinance should look
You
at.
need to have a water source for those
Yes,
plants, is what you're
yes.
talking about.
Yeah, and a lot of landscape ordinances that the cities, various municipalities have instituted have looked at specifically irrigation requirements as part of that xeriscape requirement. They're saying that all, trees and shrubs need to be on drip irrigation, for instance, as opposed to spray irrigation, because it's more water conserving, right? So definitely something that should be considered as you're kind of reworking the ordinance.
Can I add just one more
Do you
thing
want to?
real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Sorry to interrupt. I just, and this is just linking it into something else, but we struggle with speeding in the city. And I just read a study showing that if you plant trees along streets, it slows traffic. So if that's part of the xeriscape plan, that we do have some trees with drip systems, like Sherry just said, and keep them alive, they actually slow traffic. And so it's kind of two birds.
I think we
with
got to be
one
very
stone.
specific on the trees, because some trees will pull up our sidewalks.
That's right.
So I think we have to, that's where I think
quickies.
you're going back west, got to list exactly what it
Yeah.
is. This is
When we were-
only what can go in that xeriscape.
Yeah,
And
like
they
when we
have
were
that listed
landscaping-
on the.
We have a list of
On the
those.
site.
That's good, yeah. I know that Lehigh City has this water-wise landscape guidelines that they did for xeriscaping 3 years ago. And there's an extensive list of plants and shrubs and trees and stuff, and it might be something to swipe.
Yeah.
mean, we don't-
And the conservancy districts have excellent standards as well. Are any of you familiar with the localscapes method? Have you heard that term, localscapes? Getting one nod.
I've heard of local donut shops.
Yeah,
Tell me
so
about
so
localscape.
Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, which is just up the valley here, they developed what they call localscapes, which actually is pretty generous as to what it allows in terms of like lawn is still a part of it, and but it's cutting back unusable lawn, right? The stuff that we're not actually playing on, and getting into usable spaces that way, and so. So I think there are a lot of different standards out there that are existing. You don't have to reinvent a standard. You can point to one or two and say, we'd like to kind of follow this
Well,
generally.
and I don't want to jump, you might have a slide on this. There were water-wise programs. And I remember that coming into the council, so the rest of the council can help. We didn't adopt it because we felt like the criteria, we could do the park strip, but they wanted to have so much more xeriscape in that front yard that we did not want to put that requirement on the residents at the time. Some of it was, we felt like it was obtrusive to the resident for that requirement.
Yeah.
So that's something we're going to have to be very well defined, because we've had a lot of residents email and ask about the water rights to get to get grant or get money on it, and they're not eligible in Highland because we have not said we would make that a requirement. We had to be a requirement. Does that the rest of the council remember that?
Yeah, and we went back and forth on that one also, of whether we wanted to allow that requirement in order to qualify for that, or we wanted to allow a little bit more leeway in how people wanted to landscape their yards.
With the yards being as big as they are, like there's just one in my neighborhood, we're like acre lots. That's a tremendous amount of coverage on any corner lot, financial burden to.
We've had a
do that
couple turn
extensive.
into all sidewalks and all asphalt,
Yeah.
which is I don't think it's what we want. Does that mean, seriously, I think I
Right.
can drive you around. There's some that have turned the whole front yard into an asphalt, and there's some nice houses. I mean, they're all multi-million-dollar homes. I was really surprised they took that. So we've got to be careful if we're okay with that look or not okay with that look.
Do we have to worry about drainage for water conservation with whatever they put in, whether they're doing copious amounts of concrete versus drainable gravel or things like that? Does that?
Rob, I think by law, they have to retain it all on their own lot.
That's the general rule, yes. Retain your historical flows on your property.
We had problems where people using snow blower, moving the water off of their site, their driveway onto the neighbors with snow.
Well, I meant more like for drainage for groundwater instead of, whether, say the whole place is flat. I mean, I'm just talking about groundwater because we want it to go into the ground and not have a solid concrete thing, so.
Well, there's permeable pavement.
Correct.
Have you?
That's right.
We can make that a kind
I don't know how that would
of
work with the
standard
frost
in
that we have.
certain areas. I don't know, but
I think that we've had a lot of good discussion about this. Are we?
I think there's a lot of
Falling off the
details.
cliff.
There are a lot of
We're
details
in the
getting thrown out
weeds.
here.
We're in the
Yeah.
weeds where we just need to
We're in the
know.
weeds. Can I just ask, it appears that we'll have one standard for commercial, industrial, and institutional, and then we'll have another one, so we'll really have two standards.
So yes, there's that
Rather
potential.
than 15 or 20.
Yeah,
that we
Correct.
so there's that potential. And what we've seen other communities do typically is they'll usually require, with the residential side, I mean, all the other uses, it's just a requirement.
Yeah.
Period, right. With the residential stuff, they vary in their approach. I think a lot of them don't necessarily want to impede too harsh of a restriction on residents, something that they can't keep up with, whatever. And so,
But the
you know,
only thing we can control is new construction and reconstruction. That
that's
requires
exactly
a
right.
permit.
Yeah, you can't, and that's just it. And I think that's something that they've made very explicit in their ordinances, that this only applies to new landscapes, not
Yeah.
existing, because the last thing you want to do is freak everybody out that they have to tear out their grass. So,
Well, I like the way we're going.
would
Yeah.
something like
So-
tiered water pricing address?
No, that's gonna be a different
This-
element, right?
It's a different slide.
it's a different slide. It will influence their behaviors,
Yeah,
right?
Well,
Right.
But it's not the same thing. And we have actually had some conversation just in the office earlier today about, like, does residential code actually become a barrier for people because they're, like, afraid to touch their yard due to meeting the requirement, right? So there is a little bit of, like, sticky area here with the residential, but if you want to restrict it to, like, just the new and reconstructed, or maybe it's just new, that's kind of up to you guys, or we could just stick to the other uses. So that's the kind of answer I think
You
we
want
need
that
from this
direction
group.
tonight?
We need that direction.
So direction, okay, I'm just gonna, commercial and institutional and family housing, is everyone seem to be okay with that?
yes.
Okay, as we go into residential, are we okay looking at some xeriscaping, or do we, or what's the thing, what's the rest of everyone else feel?
I just wanted to clarify on the residential, there are some neighborhoods that have landscape requirements. Would this be able to override that? Or if a person who is existing wanted to come in and say, hey, I like this xeriscaping, but I'm either bound to this, or I only want to do part of it, will that allow someone that's not a new build or a reconstruction to participate in some manner?
I think only if you wrote the ordinance to override it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So by saying yes to looking at residential, I mean, you're not necessarily agreeing to adopting it right now, right? Like, you're basically opening the door to, we're going to have a conversation down the road about a residential landscape ordinance. So,
Well, what's everyone,
and what that looks like, we don't know yet.
thumbs up, down,
Up?
Yes.
thumbs up,
Yeah.
thumbs up? I
Up.
think we're okay looking at residential.
Okay. Awesome.
I don't
Awesome.
think we can touch HOAs. If HOAs have requirements.
All HOAs must be touched.
I'd be careful. I'd be careful with
All
HOAs.
HOAs need to be eliminated.
No. We don't want to maintain all their stuff.
Next one.
So if I understood correctly what you said, we've agreed to talk about it.
Correct.
We haven't
Yes.
agreed to do anything.
Right.
And that is an acceptable, it answers, it gets us that green
A
check.
check mark?
Plays
Yes.
the chess.
You want to explain
We're
that?
playing chess.
So the requirement is for the planning commission to make a recommendation for those new uses for low water use landscaping requirements. So having a recommendation in the plan that says explore options for revising our landscaping ordinance for these uses meets that requirement. And we spoke with someone from the Department of Water Resources, and they don't really have, they're not standing over you making sure that, it's line by line, dot by dot. But this is a good start. And yeah, let's move on to the second category, rebates, incentives, and rewards. Sorry. So if you recall, the public was very interested in having access to rebates. So some ideas and options. We didn't notice any, incentives or rebates currently, but what you could do, and we've kind of talked about this with the landscaping ordinance updates, but meet recommended community water efficiency standards based on what the Central Utah Water Conservancy District is recommending. There's a letter in your water conservation plan that outlines exactly what those requirements are. They might have been updated, so that would be good to check. But by doing that, you would qualify for a lot of the programs and rebates. Another idea would be if you don't like those standards or you wanted to tweak them, you could adopt a Highland-sponsored water conservation incentive program or programs and decide what that looks like. And then, of course, if you have other ideas, we can chat about that too. So I'll pause, looking for feedback on these two ideas.
Are there other cities, say a Highland sponsored, are there cities we could look at that are currently doing a city sponsored, so we could see what it looks like and how much it costs? I mean, the cost is going to be the biggest question.
I'm personally not aware of another city doing it. Okay. So that doesn't mean that there isn't one. We could look further into that. So I think that the cost would vary on just the scale of what the program is looking at.
Of course.
For refunding. So
I'd love to. I've got the front, and I'd love to change it.
But we could certainly
get the
look
grass
at
out
that.
of there, and
Yeah.
but I'd like some financial help.
Central Utah Water Conservancy District has a residential rebate program for various things like toilets.
Right. Well, the question for us is that adequate? I don't know how many people are using it.
The reason why I'm sure we're not aware of other cities doing this, because usually all of us cities just point to Central Utah.
Yeah.
We don't blaze our own trail on the water use stuff. We rely on the Water Conservancy districts to do that. So
that makes
if we
sense.
wanted to parrot theirs, copy theirs in some way, that's a possibility, but that's probably where we'll end up finding data.
And I believe the reason this Highland-sponsored idea is even exists is that there's been some debate in the past over whether to follow the Central Utah district standards, right? So
That's what I brought up.
If if you want to go that direction and follow that, that will take care of the point, and it won't place the financial burden on Highland. So.
Yeah. Good.
In terms of other incentives, one of the hard things is the city doesn't have a ton of money to just offer up to pay for this. But I just had the thought of when we look at our PI tier or rate study that's coming in, perhaps there's an incentive for people to get some kind of credit against the PI rates if they show they've done certain landscaping requirements. Then it's less of a money the city spends and more of just we don't collect a certain amount of money, but we can at least maybe budget for that better and put that into the rate structure. So there's some kind of incentive to do that.
It's like the bring your phone to the cell phone plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've done something, here's you'll get a credit on your bill every month for the next 12 months or something in this amount.
I like that.
I do too, and it doesn't have to create.
When we did that with I think it was the pressurized irrigation or something, and if we got it early, or I can't remember what we were on. We were hooked on to septic and all that. That's what it was when we went to city sewer. And we did it early, and we got it cheaper. And it gave us the incentive, and a lot, most of my friends too, but.
Especially if we're going to impose new rates that some residents might be a little leery at. If there's encouragement of, well, we got to impose these new rates, but you get some discount if you do this kind of work in the
Yeah.
meantime.
That's
And
great.
people do it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, people will do it.
I like that.
What's the rest? Rest you feeling something like that?
I had residents ask me, saying, do we rip it out now, or are we gonna get penalized, or like, when do we do this? Like, a bunch of people were ready to get going on it. They thought it made sense, but they were just waiting for guidance. And the city was like, just wait, we don't have any info on that yet. So I know there was positive for that.
So in terms of meeting the Conservancy District requirements, is that palatable?
In the past, the council had talked about it. At that time, they did not move forward, so it'd be if the planning commission and council feel like they'd like to relook at the Central Utah Water, or do you feel like, has the plan changed from what it was before? You know?
Okay, so maybe a recommendation to revisit what
I mean,
those
is
standards
everyone
are.
okay revisiting, or?
Yeah, we can revisit, but it was too restrictive, so we didn't.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I think there has
We
been
don't
an
know if there's
update.
changes unless we revisit it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Both, yeah.
Did you get clear enough direction there?
Sorry.
Did you get clear enough direction? Revisit.
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 Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Yes.
We'll put that down.
Looks to me, from what's up there and the discussion that we've had around it, that we're talking exclusively at this point about rebates, incentives, and rewards dealing with landscaping.
That's correct.
I would also like to see something with, in the rebates, incentives, and rewards, which may just be an education issue, about rebates, incentives, and rewards that are available for upgrading appliances. So
Yeah.
that we're not just ignoring the culinary side of
Correct.
things.
And there is an education section that we can chat more about that. Okay, sounds good. Great ideas. Thanks, Rob. Okay, the third category, water conservation coordinator, committee, or team. This is looking at how do we empower a person or team to really, keep track of water conservation in Highland, making sure that goals are being met, public information campaigns, whatever it might be that your goals are. So currently you have a conservation coordinator. It's the Assistant Public Works Director, and they are tasked with reviewing water use on an annual basis to determine the effectiveness of conservation measures. So a couple of recommendations is to give this person some support by creating a committee, team, or board. And that can be composed of a variety of individuals. You can bring in irrigation companies, other water providers, regional entities, really just whoever you think should be at the table and talk about regional goals together. And then this could also help with that piece of going back to the Great Salt Lake. How are we working together as a region, as a watershed, to return some water to the lake? So I think that might be that's our only recommendation for this section. So thoughts on having some sort of team, committee, or board?
Well, he's on most of the water boards.
Jeff Murdoch, serve on water boards, it goes to their UK irrigation, American board, all of them. Well, but he does have a lot of duties. He also, I think, the director as well, coordinator.
So, Aaron, what is the other water board we have? I mean, Brent Wallace is on it. Mark Thompson is on it. What's that board? Is that the Highland Conservancy District?
That board no longer exists. So that was a Highland board.
That's what I thought. It was a Highland Water.
So the ones that Rob is talking about are the different irrigation companies that feed us water, right? So American Fork and Lehigh, and Highland Water, and the Highland one as well.
So we did have a committee, and I believe it got disbanded several years ago. But the question is, do we want to create a committee, team, or board?
It could also just be provide additional support to the current guy, who's Jeff currently, to strengthen those. So that's more of a, he takes on additional duties and really focuses on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's implied by team here is like you could appoint other individuals to kind of help with helping all these goals within this element come to fruition.
So does Jeff have an assistant?
Jeff is the assistant.
I know,
Under
but
Jeff
does he have anybody that works with him directly?
No, so it's Chris as the public works
And
director,
Jeff.
Jeff, and then all of the department superintendents are under Jeff. So he has help in terms of, he works with the culinary superintendent, the guys, all of them. But there's a lot of people.
So as the pressurized irrigation meters become functional and we set up our rates and all this stuff, we've also approved in the recent past a monitoring system so that we can save our employees time, and it's all automated. So we'll be collecting a lot of data that Jeff and whoever else is on this committee or is in charge can bring to the council and bring ways, because we'll know then how much water usage we have in the state. So I think that's a big jump forward.
I think once we charge the big jump forward, that will cause some conservancy by family.
Maybe it's a better description in our guide of problems. You guys can also recommendations on conservation or give reports so the council can.
Yeah.
That might be,
water is
what you're saying is
say
that you have some of those work in the pressure.
Gather that data, like Scott said, so
We
maybe
need
it's
it
just we
presented to
address.
understand it.
I don't know.
I'd say that's realistic, them giving us the data, but beyond that, I mean, they're really good at operating the system, not necessarily, you know, implementing conservation strategies, so.
Okay, so it sounds like there is some taste for providing some support or rearranging things, better defining rules, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, the fourth category has to do with your physical water system. We've talked a little bit about this already. So currently, you have a pressurized irrigation system. Hooray. Smart irrigation systems are installed at new public parks and facilities. That's a requirement. And this was brought up previously, but the Highland Gravel Pit area, as Scott mentioned, is one of 2 sites being considered for an aquifer recharge project, and that replenishes groundwater and helps with long-term water storage.
I think that being determined as potential, I think it's now they've purchased the property. I assume that's a stronger potential when they spend $30 million.
So yeah, it's probably the candidate site, yeah. And I don't think we had any further recommendations
My
for your
question
physical
is, are
system.
we doing smart irrigation system inside our parks?
Yes.
So we're putting all those smart controls.
Yes, that one we have to pay. The grants that we have don't pay for that, but yes, we're doing smart controllers there as well.
So I have a question about the gravel pit. So did that just recently happen, and is there no more excavating going on
I
there?
think, Rob, you said it's in operation maybe a couple more years?
I feel like the mayor's joked about this, so we hear it's a couple more years left of operations for the last
20 years.
Yeah,
20 years.
Yeah.
Supposedly, they have a couple more years left, and then they're supposed to do some reclamation, but the reclamation of the pit's probably going to be changed a little bit if it gets converted into the aquifer recharge project, so potentially Utah owns the pit. So
But
it
looks
can't be
like-
extended forever, because they own it, they have current leases that they're still honoring, but once those run out, then there's the public.
It looks like they're working on the slope to reconstruct that.
They are.
Standard it's supposed to be. They're working on that now.
We have Central Utah will be coming in and reporting to the council a little bit more, because we have a lot of questions. You know, anytime we do reach out, they might have a year, they might have 5. We really, no one seems to be able to, lock down Kilgore, who's up there mining. We don't know. An agreement, the owner passed away up there, and so I've heard 2024, and I heard 2026, and we're in 2028. We don't know.
Is all this have to do with conservation, or does some of it have to do with safety? For example, canals that are not covered and are accessible to children where we've had deaths.
Yeah, the focus is conservation, but that can be reflected elsewhere in the plan.
Part of the conservation was closing in the different canals because you don't get evaporation. And they actually gave us more shares.
Yeah, but there is a safety issue. If
Oh, yeah,
Mark Thompson
huge.
were here, he would be saying a lot right now.
Right. So with that, we have pressurized irrigation, smart system coming in.
So I just wanted to address smart systems. Are we going as far as Once the meters are up and running, we have AI running that will predict and monitor people's usage and be able to give them an email tomorrow. You've got a leak in your backyard, please go check it. To me, that is smart, and that's where we should be. We should be headed, and technology is already there.
That's the goal of what we're headed towards with with it. I'm not sure exactly the details as to how, but I know that people will be able to, log in and see their water usage. I don't know if it's real time or by the day or how quick it is, but yes, we're absolutely trying to be as smart as possible that way.
That's great. I had not heard that yet.
I just wanted to commend the city because we had a toilet that was running for like a month and we were getting to it, but we got a letter from you guys like almost immediately and said, if something's up, your water usage is, good job. I mean, you guys are on it, so.
Wow.
We don't always have the staff time to get to that, so I'm glad that we did in your case, so.
That's interesting.
Good.
I had the exact opposite in a house in Lehigh where we went for 6 months and nobody told anybody and somebody else was paying the water bill and it just kept going up and up and up. And that's what I would love to see happen. They would be notified.
I believe our software, if it doesn't, they probably have a module that would notice, hey, there's a higher use at this time, and so hopefully we'd have that.
Council
Shocking
did
how much
approve
a drip will.
We're installing smarter meters with our BI system, and with that, the council also approved upgrading the culinary meters to the same technology so you can get both.
Would that go on the residents, or would that be paid for by the city?
Well,
It's all the same.
yeah, same thing.
I know, but yeah, I was just curious.
Residents are the city.
Unless there's a grant.
I think piggybacking on what Doug was talking about as far as programs, education programs and incentives and stuff, I think we can encourage and bring smart irrigation systems to residents in the form of probably like a rebate or
I think there's one out
a
there.
discount,
They're only like $50.
Something.
No,
yeah,
but there were rebates by Central Utah for $100 for a smart controller.
Yeah. I bought one for $50. I mean, it's not that expensive.
I'm not smart
Today.
enough to control it.
It was a couple of years ago, but not today.
With regard to the physical system, I know that we purchased a camera and a remote rig for the sewer to check for infiltration. Is there anything similar that we could be doing to check for exfiltration? Or when it happens, is it really obvious in the pressurized systems?
So water leaks is what you're,
If there's a,
slow leaks are not, it's not readily apparent, but when it gets to be a big leak, then somebody usually calls us, basically, is how it works. I don't know if we have we probably have cameras we could use, but I don't think we have anything actively monitoring it. So we really do rely on if there's a leak in the system somewhere for people to tell us, right? To notice and tell us, basically.
Slow leak in a pressurized system, not like.
That's fair.
So.
Okay, great. So the next category is outreach and education. So examples are public campaigns, helping customers understand water conservation best practices, how to read their water bill, events, programs, etc. So currently, water requirements are mailed to residents. Highland maintains a web page dedicated to water conservation information. I watched a video on there just the other day about the pressurized irrigation system. And you also utilize a number of communication methods, social media, emails, text flyers, website, and mailers, so that's great. Some other ideas, I've noted that some communities like to have support for youth education programs, so having like your water conservation person go in and talk to the kids about water and what that looks like in the landscape at their house, because eventually those kids grow up to be adults that
It'd be
have to
good
water
to
their
go
lawn.
educate the school district. Meaning we have schools, but I think the school district, their schools probably take a lot more water than residents.
I was just saying, when we lived in California, they would do that in the school. Turn the water off when you brush your teeth. Turn the water off and then shampoo, then rinse. Do the, if you're doing such and such, fill up your sink with dishes. Don't just let the water, like that was taught to our kids. Everybody knew that. Yes. And here we're, yeah. We
And-
use it quite liberally.
And those are some of the outreach and education things that I would like to make sure get to be in the general plan. Because it's too easy to focus on landscaping and ignore the culinary. And it's actually the culinary that I'm more
rare.
concerned about long-term.
So is that a yes?
Sounds like we have multiple support for that.
Doug says he'll go to the schools and do a presentation.
Yeah.
Is that what I heard?
By the mayor.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in general, it sounds like we're in support of educating people
I think it'd be
on,
nice.
on
Yes.
culinary systems. Whether it be in the
Absolutely.
school, whether it be through additional material that's handed out, whatever. Those are the sort of things we want to see. Okay.
You want to be the water?
Okay. We didn't read this second one, but back to just providing education. So a new homeowner is provided information on water efficient landscaping, and we've already talked about a good source is Localscapes, so you could point them to that site. Some communities have even made their own guidebooks and different resources that way, so having those on hand is great. So I'm just going to put down a check mark as something to look into, maybe, yeah?
I would prefer to reword that one.
Okay.
And provide new homeowners with water efficient approaches or water efficient information. Once
Beyond-
again,
Yeah, beyond the
Beyond
landscape, yeah.
landscape, yep.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
So in addition to that, and this is a question for Rob, when a developer comes in and wants to develop a subdivision, do we give them our landscaping ideas? I mean, do we say, here's some things we'd like you to do? Because in the end, they control a lot of the landscaping.
For all of the public, so there's two kinds of public landscaping that we require, and
Sure.
the one of like trails and open space or the parkway detail, we do a lot of work with them on that. But when it comes to the park strips, we usually just say, and we know the residents will put the park strip in what they want to do, but here's the requirement for it. Try to give them the heads up, how well that gets kind of passed on to the new homeowners, probably not super well. Like we have a note on the plat that talks about landscaping needs to be done within a certain time period, but again, many homeowners don't look at their plat before they buy a lot. So it's one of the things that we could do better at, making sure we talk to the developer and also go beyond the developer to talk to the people actually going to live there about what we need from them.
So
Welcome packet.
how about, like in the development, could we require the developers to do the park strips? So they're one consistent, they meet the criteria? Or is that infraction of personal liberty?
Well, it's more of a logistical issue because when they put the subdivision in, they're still building it while selling lots, and then they want to put it the home in. If you do your park strip, you're gonna have all the equipment go
Problem with
over the park strip and then break the curb and break the sidewalk and repair all of that. And so we don't really want them to spend all that time putting in stuff that they have to tear out and do it again. They don't want to do it either. So it's kind of a chicken and egg of when do we get to tell them, now go?
But that, you're talking development, but you could put a part of the building permit of the home that in order to get the occupancy permit, they have to have that front.
The occupancy permit is what I was thinking.
Yeah,
We
have-
can't tie it to it thanks to our state legislation.
Oh, that's right. You cannot hold a building permit up because of landscape. I found
Oh.
that out.
That is a requirement now. So we can't hold up either a subdivision or a building permit.
That's
because
right.
of landscaping. Like that.
What about water features? Is there any kind of restriction or anything?
One of the
about-
recommendations is to have limitations on water features because of the evapotranspiration. So yeah, that's definitely something you could
I
include.
just know that was very trendy a few years ago. All the landscapers were putting it
Yeah.
for desert, and I know they ripped out everything in Pleasant Grove along that on-ramp, off-ramp that was all water features and trees and everything. They just ripped everything out of there to try to be more water effective. So
And
I was
it's
just wondering
ugly.
what we have in that regard.
Where was that at?
In Pleasant Grove.
That, they put a lot of money, the city put the money in that. It wasn't just UDOT.
Yeah.
But the city
Yeah.
did it, and then they rip it all out now. Yeah. Exactly right.
Well, that was from traffic though, I think, not water conservation. They ripped it out because they had to widen it, yeah.
Turn the water
They
off.
had turned
Yeah.
it off.
And then-
Everything
Yeah.
was dying.
It
Yeah.
was dying.
Rob, can't you ask them to do the landscaping but not make it a requirement? for the permit? Can't you just say, we'd like you to have that done, and then see if they do it?
Yeah.
You can move Cass Nancy
They
you want.
won't, but yeah.
That's the problem, is absolutely. In fact, that actually might be a good time to do the education is, there's like, I'm trying to think of when the moments are where the city actually interacts with the homeowner. Not a lot. And it's when they get their utility account set up, that's kind of the last time we really talk to new residents before they have a problem with the city. So it's that point, or getting a building permit. Subdivision stage is too early, so it has to be somewhere in there. So I would love to say, please do it, and here's the requirements, and here's what we offer.
And if
It'd be
it's-
more of an education than a kind of requirement type thing.
And what about for existing, where it's like if they're applying for a fence or an ADU or something like that, some kind of, you know, basement finishing, anything like that where the city might have interaction? At least for the water-wise education.
I mean, maybe for the general plan, the answer is look at ways of reaching out to current and new residents about how to educate them on this. And, you know, maybe we have some examples, but we'll have to figure out. I mean, your point's great. We just don't have a lot of points of contact with residents other than our newsletter, which some will read religiously and some will never look at.
That's right.
While they live here.
They don't read the messages?
I do.
Everyone reads
And
yours.
yours, Mayor.
I read it.
Keep his delusion up.
Rob, can we consider impact fees that specifically address water conservation and the impact, I mean, the actual impact that developments have on that?
You can require impact fees, and we do for our PI system as a whole, and so we could potentially throw in certain facilities related to that, but we'd have to be very specific about what facilities we're funding. You can't use impact fees for maintenance or to improve your level of service, so there's kind of hard. But if we had a system that we could say, oh, we need to do this facility for our PI system, I mean, you could do like general plan says to do this, so we require that in our new impact fee study that we
Right.
require this facility, sure. We just would have to figure out how to tie those two together.
But that's where I think that incentive comes in. Hey, here you have a PI impact, but if you do the following criteria of Zeroscape, you have less impact.
I like that.
Yeah.
Would that be a possibility?
We could do, I mean, theoretically, we could do some kind of rebate for an impact fee for,
Right.
because we assess it at the building permit stage. Like if you, by the time you get C of O, if you can show you've done certain things, we'll rebate you a certain amount of your PI impact fee.
At the point of the occupancy permit, if it's
Yes.
done and in, you get this back.
And
So that's our last time we deal with anything with the building.
Yeah,
And that can
exactly.
include your appliances.
Yes.
Yeah, like
Right?
instead of
For
requiring
culinary
like
water,
water
that could
efficient
be
toilets,
your water efficient, this,
you
that.
incentivize.
That's
putting
right.
in-
The water heaters, the different
There's
things
another
like
good
that.
financial potential incentive or reward.
We need that board operational that they were talking about here, so we can get all this put together.
So I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. The conversation around the parkway reminded me that I accidentally skipped a slide. So we're actually back to the category of ordinances, standards, and development policies. And these were a couple more ideas, so I just wanted to touch on those quickly. So this first one would be to seek or use existing funding to transition your existing parkway and other city-maintained park strips from turf to Xeriscape. So I'll pause there. Just what's the appetite for this first one?
Well, SEEK funding would be Utah Central Water Project. Wouldn't it?
Can't people already do that?
Could be. It could come from multiple sources, honestly.
I think the question is this a goal that we want to transition, you know, Alpine Highway and all those other, you know, parkway details that we have? We don't know what the funding is yet. We'd have to figure it out. But to say, yeah, we'd like to do that if we could figure out the funding for it. Is it worth putting in there? Is that
A grant, you were able to obtain a
if we could get a grant, you know, it's like, you know, search
We were
search
obtain a
for-
grant,
search for
absolutely.
funding to do this project.
Did
I'm
you
hung
not
up-
help with anything like that on Alpine Highway?
I'm hung up on the word existing.
I think that's just like, sorry. I think that's intended to say if you had existing funding that you wanted to
If it's
allocate.
available.
If it's available. It's
Okay.
not, we're not saying it is.
Because
so.
I'm going.
It's just, would
existing,
you
what's
want-
We
existing,
need to
'cause we're not able
we need to
identify
reword
it.
that sentence,
Yeah.
so.
Do you want us to look at our budget and find a way to do this, or, you know, say, we need a tax increase if you want to do this?
Or we're gonna apply to MAG or UDOT or whatnot.
I just wish the word were out, not there. Seek or use funding through transition.
Yeah, it doesn't look super great.
Seek funding.
Very good.
There you go. I like it. Now I can relate.
And I think this would be a good thing to include in our plan for a couple of reasons. One, if we're not updating our parkway details, then that seems like kind of odd to be encouraging residents to
We're
update things,
hypocritical.
and we're not. Second of all, we really believe that we can have xeriscaping that is nice, attractive, water-wise, and by doing this, we can demonstrate some of those. Look, you can do something that looks like this. It is still beautiful, but
like
it uses a lot less water.
I love that because right now on Temp Highway, or, I'm sorry, yeah, it's Temp Highway there, that's for 92. The grass is dead half the summer. It just looks bad, and the trees, because of the wind, that
Yeah.
works through there, it
lack
just
of
looks
water.
really bad.
You're all right. And we've been talking about trying to get the trees back in.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to add a counterpoint, though. I brought up earlier, I mean, if you eliminate all your trees and put everything rock around the highway, I think you have to think about beautification.
Oh, I think you want trees.
No, it needs to have trees.
No,
but
it
just
needs
ones
to
that'll
have trees.
survive.
Yeah,
Yeah, it needs more
Yeah,
trees, because
definitely.
trees slow traffic.
Definitely.
Okay,
We're just
good.
talking about making
I didn't
sure
hear
No,
that
but good
part.
point, Scott. I think it's a good clarification.
Yeah.
Better drip than spray at the window.
I think the question is, would we be looking at existing parkway detail to maybe transfer to xeriscape?
Good.
And you know what, I've seen some beautiful xeriscape with, they don't use rocks, they use mulch. Like, and it's not the kind that blows away, it sets in that really dark, it's got the beautiful Carl Forester and other kinds of grasses. and
Yeah, there's a
beautiful
glue you
trees.
put on top.
Plants are actually a lot happier in a non-rock.
Yes.
What's that?
The plants are actually a lot
Where's that?
happier in mulch than they are in rocks.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, and to Doug's point, the city has an opportunity to set an example for the community. Say, hey, this can look beautiful. You don't need turf grass. Yeah.
Hey, how could I do that I saw?
It can also open the opportunity for partnership with groups like the Water Conservancy District. They love projects that can be a demonstration
I agree.
feature,
Yeah.
especially if you incorporate like interpretive signage and things that are educating people. They're often willing to put up money for those sort of projects. So it could be a good way to kind of garner some of those funds.
And then the last one in this category was really just to look at existing plans, ordinances, standards. For example, the Highland City Design Standards, and find opportunities to integrate water-wise principles and language in those documents, really so that they're speaking to each other, that they're consistent, and that they have the standards that you wanted to promote. So the question is, would that be one of the recommendations, to explore opportunities to update the language in your resources to have water-wise principles?
Yes,
Cool.
I think there's such an opportunity with the Highland City Design Standards to update that, and I think that it could mitigate so many issues that come to the commission and the council. I mean, even just this new professional development zone, and so I think incorporating some, water-wise language in there can.
With photos, because Highlanders love photos.
I think everybody loves photos.
Yep, and we can get them from other cities, other locations, just recommendations, so people get a vision. If they're not into that, they don't know where to start.
I think the more places they find water-wise, Conservancy could, slowly sinks in.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember where we were. Thank you.
We have about 40 minutes. Our goal is to be done by 8:55.
Okay, we'll do it.
Well, actually,
There are,
I think
this
we're doing well.
This
We're
is
doing
the
well.
second to last category, so we're
Okay.
almost there. Thank you for your patience. So this one is water conservation pricing. So essentially, if people are charged a lot they're probably going to reduce how much they're watering. Current efforts, you penalize for high culinary water use. Highland also utilizes a tiered rate structure to bill for drinking water use. Hydrant meters are used to meter and charge contractors. You have a secondary metering project underway, and data collected from that will help to inform a future water rate study. We didn't have any other recommendations for that one, unless there's any ideas from you all. Okay, we made it. Last category, planning and goal setting. So currently you have a water conservation plan. It was adopted in 2022. The requirement is to update this every 5 years. Our recommendation would be to, similar to, updating other standards to have water-wise language. You could tackle some of your plans like water conservation plan so that it matches language in the general plan, look at the stormwater management plans, capital improvement plans, really just making sure all of your plans are tied together and are consistent with different measurements. Like for per capita water use, I noted that there's several different numbers, and sometimes it's equivalent residential connections are used and they're not consistent, and then there's different population projections. So that would be really beneficial just to have that all nice and consistent.
Would that first point there cover the water budget? I haven't seen anything about that.
We're on hold with the water budget just because it's tied to future land use, and I don't know that we've decided exactly what that looks like just yet, but yeah, that will definitely be addressed. So thoughts on this first idea?
I think the second one, develop a drought response water shortage plan, is really important. I know 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were like, we're probably gonna have to restrict culinary water. It was desperado, and then we got amazing couple winters. So I think that's just smart.
Yeah, Rob, I know some cities have like ordinances that actually don't allow for rain barrel catchment systems, right?
We don't.
But we don't have anything, okay, that's good. I mean,
No, we don't allow capturing.
We do.
We don't prohibit it.
We don't prohibit
don't?
it, right?
It's not
The
against the
state
law.
has a certain amount you can collect by state law,
Just from
but
your
you can talk
roof.
with the state and they'll like sell you like, here's your big water barrel
Right.
that you can use.
I told my wife she couldn't do that.
You can, they
Oh,
changed
I
the state
lied.
law.
So,
Oh, that's plenty. We just want to use it for our own garden.
Yeah, that's
I
what
think
we're doing.
promoting something like that
You just made my
would
day.
be great.
Yeah,
so
we're-
what they,
we're doing
when the Rain Barrel program also reached out asking for the city to pay for the rain barrels. That might have been where you heard the city said, no, let them do it on their own.
Yes, please let them do it on their own.
There are cities that do that, though.
They are, that's why they reached out.
Yeah.
There's some
And
that do their dial picture
That's
things for
just
85,000.
another middleman trying to make a business for themselves. That's not important.
But if it can have an impact on how much they pay every month.
I can get
Their
people
PI
free
bill.
rain barrels. My husband works at the Layton Dairy, and they throw them away.
All right, you see it
They
here.
fill the landfill, and he gives them to places all over the state, all the time.
wow.
If you need to have metal and
Where does he work at?
the Layton Dairy for Kroger takes care of all the dairy for the West grocery store.
I might call you.
So he's an engineer there.
Great. Sounds like we like the idea of the goal to develop a drought response or water shortage plan. Great.
Scott had a question.
Can I
Yeah,
just
please.
ask something? I'm just here thinking, I mean, there's a lot of pressure from the state legislature because of economic growth to put more and more housing and different things. It would seem like once we get assessing where our pressurized irrigation is and our culinary water, because we're committing ourselves to studying all of this and making plans for the future. I'm just wondering at some point, if we have some really dry years, whether we need to link future development or inhibit it if we're running out of resources. Because I think a lot of times these mandates we get out of the state takes no consideration of our infrastructure or our resources. So I don't know. I mean, if that's a possibility, but
So,
maybe.
so there are already some limitations because water shares are hard to find right now. So some
Right.
cities have, it becomes very hard, so it will limit development of water shares. I actually had an opportunity to bring up the water. When I talked to our state rep here, Brady Brammer, he mentioned the state's going to be focusing a lot on water next year. That was one of the things he said, that they're already looking at bills. But it was mainly about how many shares the city requires the developer. It's always going to be on the developer side. The
Right.
eyes are coming, hey, the developers need to bring too much water. The developers, on things. So it's something we just need to be aware that will be probably coming next legislation. That's where your question comes in.
Right.
And
I mean, we don't have unlimited resources, and if we're having a terrible drought, can we not say, okay, we're gonna limit the number of building permits this year? I don't know.
I think
It's
some
just an
cities have
idea.
done that.
Yeah, they,
That could be a policy that you include in the drought response plan. Yeah.
So when you hear a water share, this is what's explained to me. When you bring a 1 acre water share, what we're saying is you should build on that 1 acre, put 4 feet. The problem is when you have a drought and you only get 80%, when you only get 80% of that 4 feet. And so that's the problem, like you said, in water, it's not, they don't get their full share. And that's what we were trying to share a couple of years back on. We can't guarantee you're gonna get your full share because we're not getting your full share. And so that's what you're saying the plan has to be preparing for is if we have a drought, we can't provide the 100% water share that they thought they're getting. So,
And that's when we have farm and irrigation plans. We have that county that has that.
oh, that's where you restrict the days they can water, the time. We did that. What our restrictions were, we encouraged that they would not water from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. So it was during, and then it would go, well, why are you doing the city water during the day? And we're going, well, we can't handle the pressure all at once.
That's right.
So we're trying to water during the day when you're not, because we're draining it down.
Well, that's a good point, Kurt, because I like to watch neighborhood and see how they deal with water. And when you see the water come on in April, and all of a sudden, all of these neighbors' yards are coming on, it's because they need to be educated on how to operate the system. They never turned it off.
Well, that's not water-wise, they didn't. So the other thing we need to watch, since we're talking water, our system will not pressurize till about the 15th of April. If we see sprinklers kicking on in yards, we probably ought to let the city be aware, because now we have a risk of cross-contamination of our culinary system, or from our culinary, from our pressurized system. And so you might see some, because I had heard last night, because I saw some people out mowing, and I go, what? And they go, well, they're going to be turning the water on. They've got a cross connection. I go, nay, that is not. that brings great risk to our community. So I think it'd be wise, as us as here as leaders, we need to be aware of that. That we, if we see that, we just it takes a
Honestly,
risk.
I think that's worth putting on those reader boards on the two main, SR 92, and, check this website or whatnot to understand when water comes on, because we got a bunch of new homeowners, they don't know.
But that comes back, I think, what Trent's also saying. If we can get more smart controllers, when it rained, the sprinklers don't kick on. And everyone goes, well, the city, our problem is we couldn't control it. Now we are. With our smart controllers, we'll be able to put it on a rain gauge and shut them off, or have that, say you've got so much moisture. That's what the smart controllers are supposed to do.
That's right.
But a lot of us have not. That's that education of smart controllers. What does a smart controller do? It's not only can you do it with your phone, it won't water if you had a big rain day.
That's right.
do you remember when we had the drought and they said don't water until May 1st?
Yeah, we waited till May 15th.
We saved tons of water. Is there a way that we can maybe put off turning on the irrigation for another week or
Lawns, I know,
something?
they like staying dormant for a long time.
They
do.
I usually
They
don't
will stay dormant.
really water, like,
We can absolutely do it. It's just a matter of, do you want to? I mean, so.
It's new trees, things like that.
Yes,
Depends on
it's
how
just a
wet.
matter of, do you want to deal with the people who come to us as soon as things warm up and say, I need water now,
Okay,
right?
now I'm going to explain it the other way. I paid for this irrigation system. I paid for the pressurized. I'm paying for the pressurized irrigation. Where's my water? I'm just saying we've all
right.
been there, but that's the question you get. Now, when you have a drought, you can say, I think during the drought, everyone was really pretty sensitive about it. I agree. We don't have to, we might have a wet spring. We don't need to turn them on. But we got the assumption come the other way. I'm paying for it, so I want it. And that's why some people, with Trent, I paid for the water. I want to use my water.
Well, along those lines, how many people in the city do we have who own their own water?
Own their own water?
Yeah. I own my own water in Lehigh, and I just rent the pipe from Lehigh City. I pay my water bills to somebody else.
So
Do we do that here in Highland?
no, not unless you have irrigation shares, and that means
That's
you had
what
to-
I'm referring to.
So if you have to have an active ditch that you can pull your water out of. And a lot of those, we have tried to work as a city to be very open to get people off the ditches, because that's where we had some, when you're talking about safety and things.
Safety, I know.
And to be honest, it was very inefficient. The water, as you go down, I don't know how many houses, I think there was one, we were trying to just get down 18 houses, and the district was, the water district going, how much water we waste just to get to that, all the way down to that house. And so we were trying to, they actually paid to get that resident, the sprinkler system.
That's where I was headed with that, is what are we doing to get rid of that?
That's what we've been doing. We've been working with Lehigh Irrigation. If we have a lot of the irrigation ditches, except for some of the farmers, are not active. But there are some.
Well, is that a standard that we need to touch on in the plan? Like
What standard?
Getting.
They'll have to get their own sprinkler system.
Something you can force legally, is it?
If they
No,
come onto
but-
our system, they have to give us shares, right? So if they want to use our PI, but if they're on a well, right, or if they have access to a ditch of some sort, we can't. I don't think we can force it. We could encourage, right?
Yeah, because there's plenty of areas where we use encouraging language as a, this is.
But I think we could be proactive. I think part of it is we could be proactive, looking for users that are still in irrigation ditches and try to work to see if we can encourage them with to go and get on our pressurized irrigation.
Okay, so what do you need from us for this one then?
Sorry, I'm just jotting down a couple notes. Water shortage plan sounds like a great goal to include. The first one is, just strategically going through all of your plans and making sure that they communicate with each other regarding water conservation. That wasn't really answered. Is that something the city wants to do?
I think that as long as we leave open the option of we're doing this as we update each of those plans, then that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, as they're updated, integrate
Plans are updated.
language. Okay. I have a question. So are the canals being piped now? Is that an ongoing initiative, or is that just kind of case by case?
I think most of them are being abandoned now. I know in other cities they move towards, they have requirements actually to pipe ditches. Highland's more about go abandon the ditch and talk to Lehigh Irrigation, American Fork Irrigation about whether you can remove these structures, because we don't want them anymore. We want everyone on our PI system.
Interesting. We're working with a community right now that the ditches they have it in their general plan that it's a part of the city's character and their rural heritage. So they want to make sure that some are preserved. So I don't know if that's part of Highlands identity too.
We went past that a while ago.
The city's
Okay.
more about getting rid of the ditches. I think.
Okay, get rid of them. Awesome. I think that's it.
Can I just make one comment? And we haven't really touched on this, but our PI system is 20 to 25 years old. I think we ought to have plans, especially in a general plan, to upgrade it at some
I
point.
think we do.
Don't we?
I think
Do
our
we?
studies have done that, haven't they?
Is that in the studies? Because we're outpacing our capacity.
We did have relatively high on the list of budget priorities for this year, a long-term study of the infrastructure, which includes the PI
Which was Doug's doing.
system.
But I would think if you upgrade it, it could also become more water efficient.
The governor is pushing for nuclear power, and the legislature's done some things toward that end. Eagle Mountain is going to go with nuclear power. It requires an immense amount of water. Can we here have part of our general plan, we're not going to go with nuclear power?
I don't think we have a location to do it.
I don't think we do, but we don't have the water to do it.
Instead of a cell tower right there at Mitchell Hollow.
So,
But will that give us a check mark if we say we're not going to allow nuclear power?
to the first point about the PI system, I think we can definitely include a general statement, or general ongoing policy that you'll continue investment with in your PI system to upgrade and enhance as required.
So as a curiosity, Rob, what is Texas Instruments? And I know is that a water treatment facility that they're building right there for Texas Instruments?
It is. My knowledge is they've struggled to find they create chips there. requires an immense amount of water to do it, and not only water, but incredibly clean water.
Great.
So they have a purification system for the water going in, then they can't just discharge it. TSSD wouldn't allow, they were planning to do that expansion. I remember like a year ago, we kind of talked about it. They all got put on hold because TSSD said they wouldn't take their water, their wastewater. So they now have to treat it to a really high level before they can discharge it. they're
So
doing
our
it-
plan will be, we're gonna
big
talk to them about putting in our pressurized irrigation system. We could, actually, we could go talk to Texas Instruments and say, if it's this cleanliness, we might be able to put it in our pressurized irrigation system.
We're also talking, that's kind of like what we're doing with the whole American Fork TSSD, the reuse project, where we're trying to get the water treated and put back into the system so we could actually use it for irrigation. To the point of, this was the big point we had with our hearing with the state engineer, was the point is water evaporates and you lose water through evaporation more than anything else. So if you can avoid pulling it out of the ground, so like pumping for more irrigation water, and instead use it twice, it's better. So that's what our argument is.
So we'd like to also, part of our plan, we'd like to work with the TSSD, Timpanogos Special Service District, to work about how they're doing that and maybe do a water trade with any city that could use that treated water, that we could maybe trade water with them. I think that's what we're doing.
So to trade the water, not to put it into your own system? Is that?
We can't, the way the system, it's actually, we're working with American Fork City. American Fork City said they could do it in their golf courses and on their things, and then we would trade some, because that's all, it's our sewage water going down, so they have to give the city back certain water back.
I see.
I know that sounds weird.
Those are great ideas.
Okay, that's all we had this evening. If you get home and you're, going to bed and you have an epiphany and you're like, oh, I wish that I had told them my idea, please reach out. We'd love to hear it. We're thinking maybe for the next workshop, transportation.
When do we anticipate that next workshop?
April 8th?
Chris Howden asked.
No, 8th is the city council meeting.
No.
Oh, it's not?
No, we don't have one the first week because of spring.
April,
Well, that's
April 1st is the first Tuesday. We're not having a meeting that week because of spring break. So April 8th is the second Tuesday.
Okay.
So we don't have a council till the 15th, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Tax day. Oh, great.
Chris Howden was asking, he can't be here because of an oral surgery, but he is asking, and we had talked about this in planning commission, of dividing up with council areas of the city. So when we go and talk about transportation or whatnot, we're familiar with that section, so we know what we're talking about and could be more effective. And so I said I would bring that up, and if we would, and they said, go ahead and divide people up that aren't here, and we'll let them know who they're with and where.
I think eyes on the ground and on the site is the best way you can do it.
It is.
So it's up to you. Do you guys want to be broken up into teams?
Well,
And
let
go
me
out, or you
ask,
wanna go no?
may I ask real quick, Aubrey and Sam, so this one, we just had you facilitate a conversation for transportation. Do you anticipate giving us materials ahead of time the council could maybe dive into, or what are you thinking at this point? What's going to be the best way to do that conversation?
I think we had anticipated a similar structure to what we
Okay.
did here tonight, and see who's doing the transportation element and see kind of what they have currently.
Honestly, I'm wondering if that one's detailed enough and you're going to need some answers on some things that even if we could have, here's a few things we are going to discuss, right? Like,
Yeah, I would love.
would be helpful.
Tonight's
Touch it.
Cutting out.
Didn't
Tonight's
touch it.
discussion was one of the easier ones. That's why we started with it, because the state requirements that we had really led the discussion for us. We won't really have that with the rest of our
Except housing.
items, with our elements. So, yeah, it'll require a lot more input from the group, and so this is an excellent idea to do some groundwork. But yeah,
So is the transportation gonna be broad, like we had it with water, or is it gonna actually be detailed as, this is?
I
what
think
we
you have to
want?
put certain roads in that are collector or not.
And that's tricky because I
Corridors.
think that this element is doubling as your transportation master plan. So it is going to get pretty specific.
So let's go back to what Audrey brought up. 1, break up the small groups. 2, UDOT has offered in the past to bring one of their vans up. If we want to say, hey, this evening we're going to do a drive-through, or this afternoon to do a drive-through, we could go. I guess as a group to do that, so we could all see, and go to specific areas that might be on the transportation plan that we talked about? Or is it better to be in small groups?
I just
That's
think
up
we
to you.
cover more area if we've got 4 or 5 people doing an area. And they can come back and report. But if we could do that, it's just gonna take a long time to drive all the
will.
parts of Highland if we do it all together.
The way I understood it was if we're in groups of 3 or less, we don't have to have a public notice and we could get together and do things. So that was the reason, one of the reasons for the smaller groups.
3 of each,
I think,
council
well,
and plan.
2 council,
2
3
council.
planning commission.
Right.
Keeps us
Either
under
or.
a quorum.
That's right. That was what I was trying to say, what he
Yeah.
just said.
Exactly, but it also gets us out into the different areas. And I know Chris's concern was if you walk this certain part of the proposed trail and it drops off and it doesn't work. If we could identify some of those high concerns or high interest areas and focus on them rather than the things that are pretty easy.
Yeah, because splitting us up is pretty basic. How do we slice up the city? Are there existing like voter registrations?
The city.
You're looking at roads.
Do you
Right.
have a map?
Okay.
Pull up?
We'll talk with Hales and
Trails?
identify those target
It's roads
those
and
target
trails,
areas.
isn't it?
Uh,
Transportation could be.
yeah, I mean, we could consider trails as part of the conversation. So, trails can also be part of the parks conversation, depending on. But yeah,
Are we setting a date? Because there's a lot of stuff to do by the 8th of April. Is that what you're thinking?
So the 8th of April to be on the ground, and just a thought that someone just said, voter district. What if we broke, because Highland's broken up according to voter districts.
How many districts?
We have
10 or 11 stuff.
11, I
I
think.
Keep
think, are you talking about the voter participation? areas?
Precinct.
no
Precinct.
precincts.
Oh, precincts.
Precincts.
Precinct.
Yes.
But I don't know if they're gonna cover the roads, because you have precincts that, will cover multiple, go down Alpine Highway.
Yeah.
So
I think
I
you're
don't
better
know.
to take massive roads. The problem is gonna be your trails. You're gonna have to, Is
So
it-
maybe 2 questions. Is breaking up in these groups, doing this kind of investigation, something that everyone's interested in doing? And then the second question is, if we're going to do that, do we want to hold the April 8th next meeting? Because that is, you know, up less than a month away, and there's spring break, and there's other things that people have to do with their lives as well. Like budget and.
oh,
other
you're
fun-
talking transportation. You could go to one of the housing elements, or you have to, so you have parks and trails and open space. That's gonna take, that would also be something because Highland has 27 parks as open space or things that way. You need to be familiar with that, and you're gonna have to be aware of the trails. I imagine up in north, you're gonna have to know where the trails are at and almost have a trail map to understand where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could we just divide up into teams and
Sure.
then we could figure out what sections teams would, let's see, who would be in charge of the map though?
You.
Okay. I'm a sucker and do those things. But
Or Chris did say that we could just divide up the people who aren't here and assign them.
that's
different-
right. Chris said he'd be very happy to do this. So he's just waiting for his chipmunk cheeks to go down.
I'm not going to be here April 8th, but I am here tonight, so I'm hearing this dividing up and when people
Okay.
aren't here, so I know.
The one that will be part of the transportation that's gonna be contentious, let's just get right to it, it's gonna be 11-200, which is over off the Alpine Highway, it's the next road. We don't have anything between 11-200 and 11-1800, we don't have anything that goes east and west. So there's gonna be a discussion, do we need to add another connection in that area? And that will be a heated discussion,
East-west connection?
yes, east-west.
And isn't there a house on
No,
11,
there's,
200?
No, there's a bar.
and I'm happy if you want, I think I know where
Yeah.
most, if there's a group that wants to go up, everything from SR 92 to the north, we can go hit the trails and we can hit the transportation, on some things that way. But that will be, everyone though, I'm gonna invite to go to 11-200. Everyone needs to understand that there is gonna be a narrowing there. How do we connect there if we desire to do that?
Yeah, we should get everyone out.
When would you like to do that, Mayor?
Yeah, let's get that
I'd
going.
like to go on that, but I'm not available the last week of March. but I'm
You wanna do it April 1st, the week before?
April 1st, that's on Tuesday, right?
So it'll be a Tuesday night, a week before that meeting.
I can do it.
What time? It's
Great.
daylight savings now, so it'll be lighter.
I mean, if you want, we could actually get the UTA van and go out. If there's that many want to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm game.
How about golf carts?
Now it's gonna be razors here. in
You
a
have to
minute.
wait.
Why don't we get closer? I'll try to reach out to UTA tomorrow, on Thursday, and ask if they might have a band. If not, we can see if we're gonna have a quorum or what's gonna happen.
And
Okay.
it's spring break that week, does that
Correct.
affect anyone that could or couldn't go?
It's not a huge deal
It affects me on the
to
second.
notice it, is it? If you just assume we're gonna have there, let's just get it over with and say, we will have a quorum, let's.
I mean,
put
we
it
need to get
there.
up on the Shamberry area, you know, that we're by our power station up there and say, what are we doing with trails? I mean, we
Yeah.
gotta finally get that resolved. We
Yeah.
gotta- On the
Let's get a
Shamberry
public notice
course
out there.
and some things that.
It'd be nice if some public showed up.
Well, and then we need to go down our other trail that's a dirt trail that we had to rip out. You know, I mean, there's a lot of little trails we.
There are.
So that would be all stuff that
11.
we cover. Would we want to bump it up so it's not at 7 o'clock?
Oh, we would do at least at 5, 4 or 5.
4 or 5, so people need to know that for work.
At least 5 o'clock, so we have time to really go see things.
What are we talking, which date?
And it should be light.
Rush
until-
hour.
It
That's
should be light
impactful.
until 8 o'clock.
What day is that again?
That's the first.
April 1st.
That's a Tuesday night, the
Light
week
until
before.
7.
Even if we don't get the band, we'll just drive it.
Okay, so what time are you saying?
5.
5 p.m.
5 o'clock.
Okay,
They made your job easy.
thank you.
We'll get some information from Hales, pass it on, and you all can figure out how you want to meet, and just let us know, we'll post notices.
If you're not able to make it, please go to 11-200 and understand that road connection.
Kudos for making this understandable tonight.
You did good job.
Thank you.
I'm serious, I understood it. That says a lot.
Do we need,
Well,
we
and
need a
this,
motion
this
to
one
adjourn
is
the
a
work
very
session?
Just declare it.
This was an icebreaker.
Hey,
messy
guys,
and
it is now
engineering heavy
8:50
thing, so-
and our work session's now concluded. You're welcome. Thank you for everyone attending.
Thank you.
We're done, thank you.